Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Sean Sweeney. I'm the Director of Education and Special Programs at the Center for Nonprofit Advancement. We are very excited to have just about a month ago wrapped up our 2020 Excel Award process, Excel being the Excellence in Chief Executive Leadership Award. And we're even more excited to be joined by our winner of this year's award, Elizabeth Jones Valderrama, who you'll meet again in a second. But just a little bit about these videos we're putting together. We decided that in the absence of, an in-person event or celebration, we would release a series of learning videos that pull out best practices that we learned throughout the process. So we're doing 4 videos. This is just one, diversifying your staff and board. But basically the topics were picked as a way to highlight kind of the best things that we were able to find out from each of our finalists. So we've had 2 other videos with our honorable mentions, and we're going to be filming 2 today with Elizabeth, actually, but they will be separate videos. So make sure you keep an eye out for all 4 of them separately. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Ian Schuman. He is our representative from our award sponsor, GRF CPAs and Advisors, and also sits on our selection committee. Over to you, Ian.
All right. Thank you, Sean. I'm also really excited to be here today with Elizabeth, our winner. Wanted to thank all the other applicants and panelists and our other 2 honorable mentions, of course. My name is Ian Schuman. I'm a partner in outsourced accounting at GRF CPA Advisors. GRF is one of the top 200 firms in the nation, and we've sponsored this award since 2007 because we are also an independent and local firm to the DC area. I've had the pleasure of being on the selection committee for 5 years now, and every year it somehow feels new and inspiring, and this year was no different. The award recognizes excellence in individual leadership among CEOs in the DC area nonprofit community, and in this very tough year, that's as timely as and important as ever. Every year, there are incredible ideas, and this video series will celebrate those, give us a chance to hear a little bit more and dig a little deeper. Sean?
Great. Thank you so much, Ian. Thanks for joining us. So Elizabeth, we're just going to jump right in. I'm joined again today by Elizabeth Jones Valderrama, who is the ED at OAR of Arlington, Alexandria, and Falls Church, who is this year's winner. So Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here today.
I'm grateful. Thank you all so much. And thanks, Ian, for supporting the award.
Great. Well, we'll just jump right in. So first question, if we can kind of set the scene. Again, this video is about diversifying your staff and board. So if you could kind of just tell us about the diversity among your staff and board when you first became ED and how it did or maybe didn't actually reflect the community that you serve.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that we're talking about this. It's so critical. So you all know that OAR is an organization that is working with individuals who are coming out of incarceration. We work with them pre-release, post-release. We also do community service hours, volunteer work in lieu of incarceration. And most recently, we've added anti-racism and liberation work to the work that we're doing. And so anybody can imagine, you don't have to look too far to know that there is a lot of incarceration in the criminal legal system very much represent a huge portion of an unfortunate situation with folks who are people of color. And most of our folks who are incarcerated are connected to the criminal legal system of people of color, which also means most of our participants who come to OAR are as well. So about 5 years ago or so, I would say when I took on the role as executive director, I'd been with OAR for 10 years at that time in different roles. But when I took on that role in 2015, one of the things that we were noticing was we had an 80% of our staff members who were all folks who had no shared experience with our participants. So it was mostly white women at that time, some who were very young, just coming out of college, and some who had been in the field for quite some time. And our population, the folks who we're on the journey with, we have about 90% of those who are coming home who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So that's a huge disparity. Just nationally, it's a huge disparity. That's how it is with the criminal legal system, but also certainly for a nonprofit that connects with our folks who are BIPOC folks, to not really have representation was really tough. So that was the reality of about 5 years ago. And now we've transitioned to a very different setup, specifically with our staffing, where 80% of the staff are Black, Indigenous, people of color, and 20% are folks who are white people. one of the things that was very critical for us was to really take a look at everything and think about everything through an anti-racist and liberation mindset and thoughts and lens. And one of the first things we discovered was that when you don't have individuals with shared experience who are working with others with shared experience, you're actually causing harm. So I'll give you an example. We had a gentleman who was incarcerated for 20 years who's come home. He's 60 years old. And and this was about 5 years ago, and one of the folks who first greeted them was a young woman who has never had, who's been connected to privilege and all of her life mostly, and had just graduated from college. And her role was to coach and mentor individuals coming home. So you can imagine a 60-year-old African-American male who's been incarcerated for 20 years, getting coaching and mentoring from someone who just graduated as a 23-year-old young woman who has zero connection to the experience or life that person's had. It doesn't really sit very well. And so sometimes you start making also comments and thoughts that are not really helpful when you don't really have shared experiences. So that's why we really wanted to make sure that we moved in the direction. And though I don't think our participants can actively say, oh, OAR has moved into an anti-racist liberation piece, what they can say is the treatment feels different. They feel more welcome. That's the feedback we're getting. They feel more welcome. They feel like we get it. They feel like we're here for them. And so I think that's what happens when you really, truly get a staff and a team of individuals, volunteers as well, board members, et cetera, who have shared experiences. And that needs to be a higher level of, let's see, a value, rather than necessarily somebody graduating from the top X, Y, and Z college, but the experience level isn't necessarily valued as much. So that's one of the things we've also discovered as in our journey.
Great, thank you for that. My next question is, when we're talking about kind of starting to make the changes or realizing you need to make the changes, was there a specific instance when you realized the need to diversify, or was it a goal that had been outlined in a strategic plan, for example, that just needed to be implemented? Can you walk us through what that looked like?
Yeah, no, there was no goal in the strategic plan. I think we just sat there and thought, wow, this is really not a good match for someone, for example, in that example I gave, or we hear individuals who are making, again, with the intent of being incredibly supportive and being able to do the work. There's no actual, malice in any of this. But I think what happens is if you aren't connected to the population, if you don't grow up in the population, if you aren't connected to the population or have really a lot of shared experiences, you start making up like stories in your mind about why that person is coming to the organization for assistance, right? And so we started listening for those languages, and we, as we started having more feedback, that's another piece that was really important. We got a lot more feedback from the actual participants, and we were getting those comments from participants that they've heard this or they felt like they were treating this way, and that's really the point where we all felt like, no, there's got to be something that we do differently, and there's something that's not aligning right now with our values. So that's what we started to look at. So there wasn't like there's that crucial point where we got that feedback, but it wasn't something that the strategic plan mandated. And I'm really proud of our team and our board who really said, yeah, no, this makes perfect sense. It's not on the strategic plan, but let's do something about it. And so we did.
Great, thank you. So the next, it's two questions, but they're kind of related, so I'm gonna ask you at the same time. So now we're gonna get into kind of like the meat of how you actually did it and how you made the changes. So kind of first part of the question is, when you really started thinking about making the effort to diversify, did it start with your board or did it start with your staff? And maybe how did the efforts for diversifying both interact or maybe not interact? And then how did you actually do it? Did you use matrices? Did you look at or update your hiring policies, things like that? If you could just walk us through kind of the whole system, how it all worked and how it all went out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it started because we started on a journey of anti-racism. And so some of this, it really did start with our team mostly, and then it trickled down to volunteers, including our board of directors, who were very willing to look at things in a different way. And I think one of the pieces that's really important is that it can't be done kind of in a silo. It has to be done with racial justice, anti-racism and liberation kind of at the forefront, and analyzing things that way, and then really having conversations. So our diversity is both shared experiences as individuals who are people of color, Black and Indigenous people of color, but also individuals who have been connected to the criminal legal system. So we make an extra effort to ensure that we hire individuals with those two specific experiences, because our mission, again, is working with folks coming home in anti-racism. And so you really need to have individuals who have been impacted by those two elements in order to really do a good job for folks who are coming home. And so what we started to do was kind of take a look at who we had on staff and, you know, what the demographics were, and compare those very clearly with the demographics of the folks who are coming in. And we said, all right, clearly we have a very different matrix or a very different lineup. And so we did look at those things on kind of on paper, but, you know, we're a small team. I think in 2015 we had about 12 people on staff, so it's not it's not a huge organization where you really have to kind of go looking for it. You can actually understand it. And so we had a group of people who went through an anti-racism training and came back changed. And once they did that, all of a sudden, then we started looking at the questions. We started asking the right questions. And for some of our folks, that meant that they were not ready to be in those conversations. And so they decided that they wanted to move on to other organizations that weren't doing racial justice and anti-racism work. That was both from the staff members, the volunteers, and from our board members. And so at that point we said, okay, no worries. You know, we really need to get the right people on the bus. So if you feel like this isn't your angle or not your area, that's totally fine. We bless and release. We honor you for your service and say thank you. And then we started looking at, like, when we post something online for a staffing job or for a staffing opening, why are we getting kind of the same exact profile of individuals? And we started saying, well, because we're, again, one of the things I said earlier was, like, we were putting value on, you must have a bachelor's degree and it has to be from these 2 or 3 different kind of fields. And you're like, well, why? You know, and so we really went through each of the actual points of our requirements and looked at it and said, why do we really need that? You know, why do we really need this? Why do we really need it? It's like we had something about, like, lifting 50-pound weight or something like that. And we're like, what? I don't think we've ever done that in a while. So, you know, again, like, let's take a look at the requirements and why we're not getting it. And then, so we started looking at that. So we redid kind of our requirements, the basic requirements for our job listing. So that was one thing. We also then posted in our job listing also that we were an anti-racist pro-Black organization. And so that really makes a difference when folks are applying. Again, has to be really upfront to let people know that that's what we're doing. We also posted that we value shared life experiences, and we encourage people who have been connected to the criminal legal system to apply. And we said, hey, you get extra points actually for that. And so we all of a sudden started getting people who were like, really, that's something, you know, that you value. And so we started getting a better group of people. We then started posting at traditionally, you know, Black universities and Latino sororities and Asian American different things. So we really started sharing our postings in different areas. We went for Blade because LGBTQIA folks were a portion of people that we hadn't really looked at before, and we needed them, you know. And so we also then started posting at other differently abled organizations so that they could start sending people, veterans, etc. And so we really diversified where we posted our actual listings, which made a huge difference in the groups, in the applicants that we were coming through. We also then asked questions from the applicants so that they could tell us their experience with anti-racism work or liberation. And so if someone could not articulate either their shared life experience or experience that they have in being anti-racist individuals, then that kind of led us to decide, okay, this might not be the right person. Let's put them in the maybe pile, but let's honor these other individuals. And so we started lifting up those voices. We particularly started posting things with our post-release participants and saying to them, hey, you all have gone through the program and you've been successful or not. And we have these job openings. Do you know someone? Do you want to apply? You know, so those things. So we really started looking at the actual participants. We say participants instead of clients. So like the actual participants of the organization, and started delivering them the different applications. And we started getting more and more actual individuals who were connected to them in that way. So those are kind of the way we did that. And then we changed the way we interviewed. You know, so one of the things is, again, the application was also, both the application as well as the interview questions were changed. And part of it too, we were looking at like, okay, this is who we have now. These are the holes that we need to fill, the experience as well as, the genders and ethnicity, LGBTQIA, et cetera. And then we called over to one of our partners, Jones Networking, which is a temporary agency. So we called over and said, look, we are looking for we have these 5 holes in our organization and we're looking to fill them. Do you have anybody who fits these holes? And so they were able to do a lot of the clearance for us, which was super helpful because it didn't mean that we had to then sit and look through 100 applications, that would be difficult. And so we worked with them and they supported our hiring in that way. So that was one of the big turning points for us in terms of really being able to say, find us someone who works on this. And that was key because they get a lot of people. So those are kind of, I think, the most important things. We also did orientation wise and training wise. Once people started to join us, we were also, throughout the process, very clear again that we're an anti-racist and pro-Black organization. And if that was not something that folks were going to be comfortable with, many just self-selected. And so obviously that then helps us help us have a less number of people that we go through. And one of the other pieces we do for director positions, which I'm always really proud of, is we get a panel of current participants to listen to the actual person interviewing with us and say, oh, okay, what they said was, this and connected. And so seeing how they would connect with them. And I think that is a huge piece because everybody feels super connected. And you also, there's things that I'm going to miss as someone who hasn't been through the criminal legal system, and et cetera. And so we really empower our participants to be part of this process, which takes a lot of work, I could say. But really, you end up with a much better group of individuals who are joining your team who really are going to be there to come from a place of coaching and support and not from like a savior model, which is what we were getting in the past.
Got it. Thank you. And I know that was a big question, so I really appreciate you walking us through like step by step how it worked. I think that you gave us a ton of like concrete things, so thank you for that. Just a couple more questions. So you've been through all of this hard work. It's obviously taken some time. So tell us about like where you are now, and if you're satisfied with where you are now, or if you see some areas for growth.
Yes. It has been a lot. And so that started, let's see, I said 2015. So now 5 years later, we're still in the trenches, looking at how things are going. We, as I mentioned, this is something that is a lifelong thing. It's like you're on a conveyor belt and we see the conveyor belt is actively, if you're walking towards in the way that the conveyor belt is going, we see that as actively walking towards racism and white supremacy. And so if you're still stop and standing, we also then see that as you're still going in that same direction. So you really have to turn around and fight the current. And so this work is always turn around and fight the current. So there's really no moment that you can say that this work is done. We are still babes in this work, even though we've been doing it for 5 years. And I think that that's important for us to know and to remember and to humble ourselves around that. Our board has really been instrumental in looking at how do we do things differently, how do we do things better, how do we make it helpful for everybody. So right now, I mentioned for our team, we have 80% Black, Indigenous people of color, including individuals who are LGBTQIA, which I'm super excited about, and then 20% individuals who are white folks. On our board, we now have a majority of folks who are BIPOC, which is amazing, including 3 of them, which is a very different experience from all of our board always. Our board has always been mostly, let's see, I think about 10 years ago, mostly white women, and then it transitioned to mostly white men, and now we are in a different experience. So now the majority are Black, Indigenous people of color, and 3 of our officers are actually Black, Indigenous people of color. And so that's an interesting experience. So, and I do want to say, just bringing people on who are people of color doesn't mean you made it. It also means you have to do the work internally to create an environment where when you're bringing folks who are BIPOC, they're going to feel heard and lifted up and honored. If you bring folks in and you have still kind of a racist component or a white supremacy way or culture, et cetera, that doesn't lift up the voices, you're going to have people leave. And so you do all this work to find the right candidates, again, staffing and volunteers and board. and then they leave. And you have to ask yourself and ask each other, like, why is that happening? So we're constantly trying to make sure that people are feeling comfortable and feeling heard. And so right now we have, we're still looking for more board members. We do have a couple of seats that we're very specifically targeting certain individuals as well as folks with shared experience. That was a really cool decision that the board made, which was we want to have at least at the minimum a 50-50 split between folks with shared experiences and folks who may not have shared experiences. And I thought that was a really awesome decision on the board's part, because then when someone approaches, you can say yes, except I don't have any seats for, our white people, but I do have some openings on BIPOC with and shared experiences. Do you have those? And so it makes it much easier to be very clear about that. And our response from people has been, I love that you're doing this. We were afraid that we were going to get feedback that was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a problem, or you're going to get sued, or, and the reality is that the feedback has been, thank you, you're getting, thank you for finally moving in the right direction. And so it just feels really good to move in that place. So we still have a lot of work to do, but we're coming along, and we want everyone else to come along with us. So that's also why we're doing actual anti-racism work in the community.
Great, thank you so much. And finally, we're at our last question. And this, the point of these videos is to really share these best practices, right? So I guess the one we're going to end with is, what first step can an organization take in implementing similar practices? Like, what's the first thing they can do to kind of get them on the road to implementing these changes?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think one of the first steps the first step, and the step that you always have to continue to look through, is what kind of organization do we want to be? So one of the things I say often is OAR is going to be 50 in 2024, and 50 years after that, I hope we don't exist. And so the goal for OAR is to put ourselves out of business. That's the kind of organization that we want to be. So what does that mean? That means that we need to kind of affect systems so that people aren't being connected to the criminal legal system in the way that they're being connected. And that means we're going to lose our jobs. And that's okay. We're okay with that. We're happy about it. And so that's the kind of organization we want. So looking at that is how you first begin to do anti-racism liberation work. And so I would say analyze that and have those deep conversations. Look at the demographics and be okay to acknowledge that as a nonprofit, harm has been done. We at OAR have been doing harm for years, for decades, and now we want to do better. And the way we've been doing harm is because we haven't been looking at these systemic issues, and we haven't been asking the right question. We've just been ready to serve and ready to, be saviors and all those things. And clearly, 50 years, that still hasn't worked. We're still getting more and more people incarcerated and more people coming home. So there's something else that we need to do. And so we really want to be honest and courageous, and so there's several steps there, I think, but certainly having the conversation and analyzing it is the first thing, and to be okay with the fact that this is going to be incredibly uncomfortable for all of us, white people and Black Indigenous people of color, and painful and hard. And so we also have to make sure that we're taking care of our people as we're going through this process as well.
Great, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I really appreciate just like the actual tangible, concrete steps you laid out throughout this interview. So thank you so much again for joining us. Everyone, that wraps up this video. I want to say thank you again to Elizabeth and to Ian for joining us for this video. And one last reminder to keep an eye out for the other 3 that will be released as well. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.